Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I just attended a meeting last night of the local Republican Party, and a professor that was there, yeah, there are a few conservative professors, he actually said that this country, and he's an immigrant to this country, but a U.S. citizen now, he said this country is under attack, and he wanted to hear from leaders, and he was talking about Republican leaders, and they're not saying anything. So it got me to thinking, and we're going to do a show right now, our show today. Yeah, this is Friday, the weekend's finally here, and I'm doing a show with that professor's thoughts in mind, that we are under attack. I think he's absolutely right. And we're not, our leaders, therefore, are not speaking up. Now, if you've watched my show any length of time, you know that that is not a problem for me. I'm not running for or from anything, and I've done a little of both. So I'm not afraid to speak up. So I don't know exactly where I'm going to go with all this, but stay tuned and you'll see. All right, we're going to start out with a story about the president, and I mentioned it a little bit yesterday, and I promised you I would get to it today, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. President Trump is one of those voices that's standing up. Sometimes it seems like he's all alone, but he has said and made it very clear that he's going to protect our history, our monuments, and punish those who try to tear them down. And he's even talking about doing it retroactively. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about an opinion piece from Newt Gingrich. And Newt Gingrich has always been a visionary. He has written a new book, and he has kind of taken a few excerpts from it. And he actually wrote this book months before the George Floyd incident and everything that led up to that. And it's pretty fascinating. So we're going to get into that. And then New York City is under siege literally right now. New York City Hall is under siege, and it has to do with defunding the police department by $1 billion, yes, with a B, $1 billion, and we're going to talk about that. But we start with a CNN story. Trump administration prepares major effort to protect monuments that includes U.S. Marshals and an executive order. Trump administration is preparing a major effort to protect national monuments that President Donald Trump has described as part of the country's heritage. And he's absolutely right. It is a part of our heritage, and heritage is not always positive. That's something that it just amazes me how people think that our history has to be positive. There's no such thing as a history of any nation, let alone any individual, that is 100% positive. You wouldn't be human if that was the case. So the idea of protecting our heritage, as you've heard me say if you've tuned into our show before, and if you're new to the show, first of all, where you been? But howdy, welcome to have you. But heritage is a heritage. The good, the bad, and the ugly. All of that is part of our heritage. And the United States of America isn't a perfect nation by any stretch, because it was founded by people. But it's the closest thing we got by far. It's the greatest country that we know of that has ever existed. And as I heard one young guy at this same meeting say, it may be the greatest one that ever will exist. And I don't see any evidence that he was wrong in that. So Donald Trump has described the country as our country's heritage, including assigning U.S. Marshals to oversee them, talking about our monuments, and signing an executive order meant to protect them. People familiar with the plan say. I don't know if you got a chance to watch it yesterday, but right as I got home from doing the show and doing my answering my, I guess, fan mail, that kind of thing on Facebook. By the way, you can chime in on any of the Facebook networks you're watching now. Also on our YouTube channel, spell it out, John Martin Talks, and I will respond to you as quickly as possible. I will tell you that normally I respond within a couple of hours usually. Sometimes on Fridays, I'm unable to do that because I take off right after the show and going fishing, and the Lord has blessed me. I'm going again this weekend, so don't be a hater, be a participator. Just join in on the show. But Donald Trump attended a ceremony yesterday at the Korean War Memorial, recognizing 70 years since the start of the Korean War. and it was a very poignant thing. I mean, if you haven't seen that monument, it's a pretty amazing. I think it's 12 separate statues kind of like walking through. And there's a reason why we memorialize our soldiers, especially because soldiers follow orders. It's not about the politics. The politicians play games, even the generals sometimes do, but the grunt guy, the guy that's in the field that those monuments really represent, is just following his orders, doing his duty for God and country, and protecting the guy next to him. That's what war, my understanding of talking to people, is all about. And they deserve every single bit of respect we can give them, regardless of how you may feel about any particular conflict. A person willing to stand up and be counted when the counting is real deserves our respect, even if you don't agree with the politics of that particular event. But military monuments, by the way, and a lot of people don't know this, are already protected under existing law. So those of you who have been out there destroying military monuments, and it doesn't matter whether they're Confederate or not, if they're under military monument law, you can already serve some pretty hard time by this. So President Trump is proposing to put additional sanctions on that and cover monuments in general, not just military. And as I said earlier, it is about time that we had someone, and I'm not surprised that it's the president, speak up. The only surprise I have is, where's everybody else? You know, I don't expect Nancy Pelosi to speak up, but I could name a dozen U.S. senators I wish would take a little bit stronger position. And maybe I'm being unfair to some of them because some of them have, so I'm not going to get into names. I'm just putting a blanket thing out there. If you're an elected official, I don't care if you're Republican or not, but I expect more out of them, let's just say. But if you're the mayor of a town, if you're a county commissioner, if you're on the school board, because it's your history they're destroying, right? It's our country. I don't care if you're black, white, purple, or something in between. You need to stand up and be counted. Now is the time to stand up and be counted. Donald Trump seems to be a voice alone right now, and he's not when it comes to JMT. And my psychic sidekick, Billy Bob Bass here, he has a Twitter handle, by the way. It's at Billy Bob Bass, and mine is at John Martin Talks. You can tell I'm a little bit fired up about this. Let's continue on. Trump personally instructed Interior Secretary David Bernhardt to restore the only Confederate statue in Washington, D.C. after it was torn down last week. Two people familiar with the matter told CNN. Trump raged at the site at the statue being burned and torn down on June 19th, tweeting, "The D.C. police are not doing their job as they watch a statue being ripped down and burned." He later instructed Bernhardt to put the statue of Confederate General Albert Pike back up, as first reported by NBC. Let me tell you, see, this is the thing. It's a coward's way. I'm not saying that every statue has the same merit. There may be statues that need to come down. I'm not even saying this one necessarily needs to stand, but there needs to be a civil process for this, because, one person just taking it, or a group of people that, we don't agree with that, is very dangerous. It's rude, too. It's rude behavior. It's just the way it is. And I remember a Robert Duvall character in the movie. I won't tolerate rude behavior from a man after he shot him. One of those like that. But, ladies and gentlemen, there's a time-honored statement, and people have said it all the way back to the Roman era, so there's different people credited with it. But there's one I picked out about history repeating itself. Mr. Santana, I think his name is. He put it up, that basically it's been said different ways that people who destroy their history are doomed to repeat it, or they forget their history, are doomed to repeat it. So when that comes to the Confederacy and slavery and everything else, we need to understand our history. How are we going to know where we've been, where we come from, how we got here, the struggles, if we destroy our history? I think it should all be a teaching moment. And for Black America, I get it. Now, I'm not pretending that I understand exactly what it's like to be a black man. Probably for an old white dude from the South, I probably know about as close to it as you're going to get without being black. And some of you who have followed my story know what I'm talking about. But how are you going to understand, like in a road map? I've said this before, but if I say it, it bears repeating. In order to use a road map, you have to know where you are on that map. And the only way to figure out where you ought to be all about you. Right? Party is the party of slavery. So if you're going to do away with the history, and maybe that's why they want to do away with those monuments, because every one of those Confederate monuments, those people were Democrats. Maybe that's the real reason. Maybe that's it. So what is the future of our monument? Is it this one? Is this basically going to symbolize, because everybody's an aggrieved person in this country now, the victim is the hero of the day. Is this the only monument we can allow to stand? A big pacifier? Are we just a bunch of big babies that we can't look at our history, good, bad, and ugly, and face the facts of it and teach us something? Can we not do that? Because, I mean, I guess this would probably offend the Gerber baby or something. I don't know. Anyway, I was on a roll there. I'm going to move along. Let me check my time. Doing pretty good. I want to get into this Newt Gingrich article. It's a Fox News, which he actually works for. Newt Gingrich, if you don't know who he is, he's a former Speaker of the House, and his wife is now the ambassador for the United States to the Vatican. And I don't know if he's still in Italy, but he was locked down over there, him and his wife, in quarantine in Italy for months. He may be off of it now. But he's written a book, and he talks what is happening in our country now and what kind of leads up to it. Newt Gingrich from Fox News: if liberty and justice for all do not prevail over anger, anarchy, expect this. And he tells you what to expect. As I watch the continuing efforts to defund and or abolish police across the country, I have been struck by the radical left's willingness to stick with its dangerous ideology even when Americans are killed because of it. And ladies and gentlemen, I've said this a little bit yesterday, but I want to expand upon it now. Black Lives Matters. That group, I'm not talking about the concept. I'm not talking about everybody who's wearing a shirt and chanting Black Lives Matter. You know, I'm sure there are people who are out there trying to just, you know, be seen and believing that it is an injustice and trying to right it. No justice, no peace. I get all that. But the group itself, the organization itself, is a Marxist organization. And they just had one of the leaders of it. And I hear this, let me just clarify this too. I keep hearing these pundits on the left saying, well, this is not very organized. It's not really a organized group. Baloney. Where are the checks going? I mean, the businesses and individuals and Hollywood celebrities are writing millions and millions of dollars of checks to Black Lives Matter. So who getting them? You know, if they ain't organized, they're organized enough to get the check. So, you know, that don't fall for that baloney. But Black Lives Matter has a history. One of the better places to look is a guy named Trevor Loudon. He's a friend of mine. Check him out. He's got a Facebook site and all that. And he's a guy from New Zealand, but he lives in America now. And he writes extensively. Now, it's intense work that he does. But check him out. Maybe we'll get him a guest on the show. He's been a guest before on my show some years ago. But he has exposed all of this. So don't take my word for it. Just look it up. Black Lives Matter is a Marxist at its heart organization. And here's the thing. They're taking over the Democratic Party. At least they're attempting to. You know, progressives will always take it to the extreme. So I don't think anybody could argue that the Democratic Party hadn't been taken over by progressives, period. Well, they're going to take it to the extreme. Now they're pushing it to Marxists. That's what they're pushing it towards. And Black Lives Matter is the new Bernie movement, basically. I'm just telling you. And I'm not saying every Bernie bro. That's not what I'm saying. But the push towards communism is a move towards Black Lives Matter. And if you don't think that, if you think that I'm wrong about Democrats, and when I say Democrats, I'm talking about the leadership, the people you've elected to office. They always, if you give them an inch, they take a mile. The one issue that proves that is the abortion issue. And I'm not even getting into the pros and cons of it. But it started out being kind of safe, legal, and rare. Remember, that was what the Clintons kind of sold you on a boy. It just needs to be safe, legal, and rare. Where is the debate now? The debate now is whether or not to kill the baby after it's already been born. I think that's about as extreme as it gets, to kill so that you're not safe from aborting until your mama dies. Mine died last year at 98, so I guess maybe I'm safe. She can't decide because what is the time limit? I always wonder, what is the time limit for the mama to decide after the baby's born? That shows you right there whether you agree with the abortion issue or not is not that relevant to what I'm saying. The progressives took it from safe, legal, and rare to debating over whether to kill the baby after it's born. The progressives will always take it to the extreme, and that's what they're doing with Black Lives Matter. According to Fox, back to the Gingrich article, according to Fox 32 Chicago, over Father's Day weekend, there were 104 people shot and 14 killed in the Windy City. He says, tragically, and these statistics are right, tragically, these statistics include a 3-year-old who was shot while in the back seat of his father's car. This follows the last week of May in which 85 people were shot in Chicago. Most of this is black on black crime. It just is, with 24 of them perishing. Think about that. 85 people shot on the last week of May, 24 of them killed. And you barely even hear a peep of it. There were 3 young black children, basically teenagers, two boys and a girl. When I call them kids because they're teenagers. To me, if you're under about 30, you're a kid, basically. The older you get, the more it's like that. Were killed within 25 miles of where I live. And it's mostly rural area. They were at these kind of parties and get-togethers, and somebody just randomly shot for whatever reason into the crowd and killed in 3 separate incidents. And another one that I know some of the family down in Miami just this week. Somebody in their 20s killed. Just killed. Black on black crime. I mean, you can take it or leave it, but it's a reality. I'm not about political correctness here. I'm just telling you the facts. And the fact is, if you're a young black man in America right now, the most dangerous person on the planet for your health and welfare is quite simply another black man. It just is. And I don't say that with any relish because it breaks my heart. And I'm not taking anything away from police officers that have committed atrocities. As I've told you before, there's not a whole lot of difference percentage-wise between, crooked barbers and crooked cops. But crooked barbers give you a bad haircut. Crooked cop can do a lot of damage. So I'm not downplaying that concept, period. But the reality is the most dangerous place to be if you're a young black man is at a gathering with a lot of other young black people. It's just, it happens every day. Fox 9 in Minneapolis reported there were a half a dozen shootings over the weekend that left 21 injured and 2 dead. These horrible casualties, Newt Gingrich's article here, casualties include a 17-year-old who was shot while driving. The people in the car with him, listen to this. So this 17-year-old was shot while driving. The people in the car with him, assuming they might be his friends, when he was shot, dropped him in the street and left him for dead. So they just dropped him out the car, put him on the street, and didn't say anything. I guess that's part of the ride or die culture, right? Ride or die. Yeah, well, it don't work too. That sounds good on a rap song. It don't work too well if you're the mother wondering when your boy's coming home. It don't work that well. And early on Sunday, there were 12 people shot while standing in line at a restaurant. One died the weekend before. 6 people were wounded. 1 was killed in other shootings. Yet, this is all in Minneapolis. Yet the police are the problem. And I'm not taking anything away. The policeman that put his knee on that guy's neck, look what I'm not making excuses for it, but look how much damage he's done to our nation. And it's not all on him. Some of this is pre-planned and everything else. I get all that. But the reality is, ladies and gentlemen, that he killed, yes, 1 person tragically, deserves to be prosecuted. The 3 others that stood by, I'm not defending them in any way. But I'll still tell you that if you're a young person of color in this country, the person you need to be watching out for is another young person of color. That's just reality. But the mainstream media doesn't talk about that because it doesn't garner them any votes. In New York City, there have been 51 shootings since June 15th. The city of New York is seeing gun violence like they haven't seen in 30, 40 years. It's just a fact. With at least 24 victims, and I guarantee you a good chunk of them are people of color, and 18 incidents on Sunday alone, according to ABC Channel 7. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about what's happening in New York in our next story, so I'll save that. The list of mayhem, back to Newt Gingrich's point here, the list of mayhem and death goes on. Newt says, I can't help but wonder how many of these senseless murders, and that's absolutely true, shooting into a crowd, just shooting, bam, and some young girl gets killed. It's happened at least 5 or 6 times that I can remember in the last 4 or 5 years right here around where I live. Just shooting in the crowd and some innocent person gets killed. But he said he wonders how many of these senseless murders could have been prevented if police in these cities had been supported by the politicians who command them. The reality is they're all commanded by Democrats for the most part, the majority for sure. The mayors, President Trump talked about this the other day in his Turning Point USA speech. The top 20 cities in America for crime are all run by Democrats because they care so much. Like I showed you that video yesterday. Check it out. Joe Biden, he tells you how much he cares when he was a senator passing the crime. But he told you in that thing, we're going to play it periodically throughout the coming months. Joe Biden, in his own words, told you he don't care the reason why your children, if you're black, are on the streets killing people. He doesn't care about that. He just wants to get the predators off the street. This is Joe Biden that you're saying is going to be your savior. Nonsense if you actually get honest with yourself. But, but run by Dems who don't care. Joe Biden, he's the king. Joe Biden is the king of I don't care. He says that over and over and over. Instead of ordering police off the streets and threatening to cut their funding, the Democrats who run, this is Newt Gingrich, who run these cities should be working to institute the rule of law and protect innocent law-abiding Americans who they are supposed to represent. Now, Newt, I got to tell you, man, I was with you till this paragraph. It's not that I don't agree with what you're saying, but you lost me because you're trying to apply logic. It's like one of my old buddies I used to work with in the drug treatment center used to say when I would talk about something, he said, you're trying to apply rational thought to irrational people. That's what Gingrich is calling. He's right to call these politicians out. But the reality is they're not capable of doing what he said. If they were, they'd be Republicans. They couldn't be Democrats and do what Newt is asking them to do. So, there's a flaw in that. And that is because the Democratic Party would never elect anyone who actually cared about law and order. That ain't going to happen. That's why old Biden, they're trying to figure out, he don't know what he's doing, but the handlers are trying to figure it out. And one thing they have figured out, we talked in depth about this yesterday, is keep old Joe in the bunker. If you want to see our podcast, by the way, you missed any parts of our show, the best way to do it, there's a couple of ways. One, to go to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it and share it with others. The videos are all there. We have a YouTube channel now. It's John Martin Talks. Spell it all the way out. All of our shows are there. And, of course, they're archived with America's Voice News, because we don't only broadcast on their Facebook site. Howdy, good morning. How you guys doing? Appreciate you. But America's Voice News rebroadcast our show across their network, Roku, Fire Stick, Apple TV. We're on Dish Network Channel 219, and we're on Pluto Network, and more to come. They archive our show every day. Just go to America's Voice News streaming channel. It's free. Upload it, however you download. I get those terms confused sometimes. Go, if you don't see us live, go under the show tabs and you will see us. Check us out. But it says here, back to this article. Unfortunately, the radical Democratic left is sticking to an ideology, this is Newt Gingrich again, that stubbornly favors criminals and hates the law. He says, I wrote in my new book, Trump and the American Future, one of the most dangerous trends, this is an excerpt from his new book, one of the most dangerous trends of the radical Democratic left is a pervasive desire or ideological obligation to vehemently protect people who break the law. And he's absolutely right. The Democrats celebrate victimhood, and lawbreakers. I mean, mostly peaceful protests, right? If you're new to the show, you might not have heard my saying. When you hear the term mostly peaceful protest, the first question would be who died or who got shot and what buildings burned down. Because when they say mostly peaceful protest, there was burning, looting, and killing going on. That's what the word mostly means. But he's talking about this. It reminded me, let me check my time, doing pretty good. It reminded me of Candace Owens. I played a video of it's about 10 minutes long. We're not going to play it now. If you haven't seen it, you can scroll through on my Facebook. I posted the whole video up there. Candace Owens, man, she is the boss. There's no question about it. But she makes a point, and it has really cost her in the black community because they don't want to hear this. It goes back to like this Orwell thing I've told you, and I may post it later. When you drift away from the truth, the people who speak the truth are hated for it. And Candace Owens is absolutely that. But she said something there that's controversial. I'm just repeating what she said. Essentially, I may be chopping it up a bit. But she basically said that when she was talking about the Floyd thing, and she was all about the fact that he was killed, possibly murdered by this, all about the atrocity. But she said to make him out a hero, she said only the black culture in America lionizes people who are the lowest level of their society. And I think she's got a point. That she went on to say, list of people, Jews and all, don't do that. Now, they may call out an atrocity, but if a person... and I've seen this at black funerals before, by the way, but you never see this on TV, and I've attended more than my share, where they call out and say, don't feel sorry for this guy laying right here because he wasn't about nothing. I've actually been to a few funerals like that. They say, you need to take example of what happened here and get yourself right with God. I mean, you don't hear that enough anymore, but that is part of the old Southern tradition of black churches. They used to speak the truth and nothing but the truth. Jesus says, set you free. He can fix it. I mean, I grew up going to black churches, man, and now, but I never had to listen to the likes of Al Sharpton, man. I couldn't have stood that. Back to this article. Today's radical Democratic left, this is Newt Gingrich's writing. Today's radical Democratic left insists that those who break laws are to be automatically regarded as victims of systematic flaws or intentional acts of oppression within our criminal justice system. Everybody is a victim. I used to do a group when I worked at a drug treatment center. I got assigned this group where it was all black men. They had several things in common. They were all black. They were all on parole from prison, and they had to attend this they had drug offenses, and they had to attend my group, and I had to sign off on them in order for part of their parole. And so you can imagine they were all, none of them really wanted to be there and I don't necessarily blame them. I didn't want to be there the first time I went into drug treatment. If you hadn't heard my show, I've been clean and sober for 32 years. Not a preacher or law enforcement. I just know what's right for me. But back to this little story. And so one of the things they would challenge me on is, hey, the system's unfair. You're white. You don't understand, even though I've been to jail myself, all that kind of stuff. But they said, you don't understand. The system is corrupt. And finally, one night, after about the third night of this, I said, let me just ask you this. Let's just give you that the system, you're talking about the system, the law, from the lawyers up to the judge, to the guards at the prison, the cops, everybody is totally corrupt and against you. And they go, yeah, that's right. I say, so, okay, let me give you that. Let's just say that you're absolutely right. It is 100% corrupt. Yeah, now you got it. Now. And then I hit them with the clincher. I said, well, then let me just ask you this. If you know for a fact that it is totally corrupt, why do you keep doing things that puts you in that corrupt system? And they all kind of looked at me. It's like, it's the truth, right? I mean, because if the system's totally corrupt, then the only real solution is to stay out the dadgum system. So don't hit that pipe and expect that you're going to drive behind the car and not get back in it, because every one of them had done something that put them back into the corrupt system. And from that point on, we actually had a dialogue, and I'd like to think I helped one or two people today in that time. But anyway, let's keep moving. And keep in mind, he says, that Newt says, I wrote this book before the horrendous killing of George Floyd. It's pretty amazing. I have not read other than excerpts from it. I need to do that, George. But he said to start a defund, abolish police movement. He said, I wrote it before the Democrat leaders in Seattle surrendered City Hall. I mean, that's going pretty wild out there right now. We'll probably update you on that Monday over the weekend. I think it's going to get heated in Seattle. It's really firing up. A police precinct, 6 blocks, commercial downtown, armed, violent anarchists. They've had shootings now in that area, so much for peace and love. He said, I wrote it before the Minneapolis City Council president said people who are worried about being robbed, raped, or simply expressing white privilege. Yeah, remember that? The woman was on CNN, one of the city council members. We played the video where she said, that expecting the 911 call for police to arrive is white privilege. It's a privilege. It's a privilege of living in a free society. I mean, give me a break. Now what is it out there? I think it's Washington State where they've issued a mandatory mask requirement. Unless you're a person of color, you don't have to wear a mask. I mean, if they're serious about that, if they're serious that the mask is going to save your life, isn't it prejudice to suggest that black people don't need to wear one? I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Help me out on this. But Newt has always been a visionary, and it doesn't sound like he's taken a knee any particular time. All right, we're gonna move on to our next story, and just I would just say read Newt's article here. This is from Fox News. I would encourage you to probably look at the book. But we want to close out the show with this story from New York. New York City protesters, this is Fox News story. New York City protesters spend second night, I think now it's on to a third night, camped out in front of City Hall demanding, they say they're not going to leave until the city officially cuts $1 billion with a B, $1 billion to cut police budget, according to Fox News. Can you imagine that? So they're camping out in front of City Hall, and they're essentially saying, we ain't leaving until you cut $1 billion from the police budget. Keep in mind that the vast majority of any police department, any law enforcement agency, where it's a sheriff, local police at a city or county stuff or state, it doesn't matter. Probably even the FBI for that matter. But I know on local law enforcement, the vast majority of the money in the budget goes to personnel. So when you cut $1 billion from the police department, you're not like just cutting down on a few vehicles. You're literally laying off, potentially, I guess, thousands of police officers, because that's where the lion's share of the money goes, to personnel. Protesters camp in front of New York City Hall to demand $1 billion cut to police department's budget. A group of about 100 protesters calling themselves Occupy City Hall there's one thing they never seem to occupy a job, but that's a side story. Gathered at a nearby park around 5 p.m. Tuesday and haven't left. They have vowed to stay until their demand to slash 1/6 of the New York Police Department's $6 billion budget is met. So they want to take 1/6 of it. I wonder, Comrade Bill, he says he's opposed to this. I'm talking about Bill de Blasio. He's the perfect little communist, because he's always about do what I say, not what I do. That is the definition of a perfect communist leader. But I wonder if he's camping out with them. Nah, I can tell you, Bill, he likes the lifestyle of the rich and famous, man. He told you your gym has to close, but not his. I mean, Bill de Blasio is a piece of work, man. He's going to go down in history certainly as the worst mayor in New York City, and one of the worst mayors, if not the worst, in the history of the United States of America, and that's saying something. The protesters say the money saved should be redistributed to social and community services, as well as health care and education. And as I say, what that really means is less cops on the street. Period. And you talk about, I'm all for education. How about the fact that where were the cops, for instance, when that, and I showed this video last week. I can't show it again right now because it got my video pulled from YouTube. All I showed was the real street video of this young black girl getting beat to the inch of her life by other young black people on a street. I believe it was in the Bronx. And they beat her up to take her cell phone and her like Nike Air Jordan shoes. And they beat her to an inch of her life. All I did was show the actual video that was taken from security footage. And that was egregious for YouTube. So I got to be careful about, the truth. Like I said, Orwell, I keep going back to that. Orwell, we talk about somebody who is a prophet, Orwell, because a society that drifts from the truth will hate those that speak it. And I guess that's why I'm getting some hate mail now. I'm definitely getting some trollers, and YouTube pulled my video. Must mean I'm doing something right. I'm speaking the truth as best I possibly can. The city has until June 30th, so just to finalize their budget. So they got another week or so to finalize their budget, which includes money for the police department. So I guess these guys are going to stay. I guess if they don't cut the $1 billion, they're going to stay until they, do a new budget. I don't know. But protester Charles Kahn told WLNY New York, he said that he was fighting. This is what he's standing. The reason he's there at this protest, fighting for a drastic change to the way that the city says that it is providing safety, but hasn't provided safety. So if they're not providing safety, I get you. If you feel like that the city's not doing their job, I understand that. But then he goes on to say this. He said, strong communities make safe communities and police don't. And so that's what we're fighting for. So a strong community, a safe community, is one that has no police officers. Well, tell that to the 4 people that's been shot out in Chaz or Chomp or whatever they're talking about it. They're calling it out there in Seattle. Imagine that. The city, do you see where city businesses now have filed lawsuit against Seattle saying that they can't run their business inside that zone? More power to them, man. People need to wake up and see what's happening. Our country, as I said at the top of the show, is under attack. It is. And that's not to dismiss police brutality or any of that stuff, but there are enemies of the state. There are people who absolutely want to do this country harm. A lot of them are running for office in the Democratic Party. But make no mistake about it, there are people who want to destroy America. Not the perfect shot, but the best shot at freedom you will ever have, regardless of creed or color. America is not a racist nation. It is not. It simply is not. Does that mean that racism doesn't exist? Well, heck no. As I've told you before, you can't legislate what's in a man's heart. So you can do all you want. If you truly want to end racism, you're not going to do it legislatively. You're really not. You're going to have to change hearts and minds. And I can tell you, the one time when people won't change for positive is if they're scared, if they're afraid. And if you cut $1 billion from the police department in New York City, the result is going to be less police officers on the street, more crime, more fear, and they're not going to listen to what you say. And if you don't want to push people to Donald Trump, then, maybe you should be for law and order. Because I'm telling you right now, all these polls talking about Biden this, Biden that, if people are afraid, they're not going to vote for change. Just keep that in mind if you're truly wanting it. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, and share it with others. I'll pray for your family. You pray for mine. But like I say, each and every day, we should all pray for this great nation. It is the greatest experiment we've ever seen by man. But above all else, like I say, each and every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day.